By conducting the first manned mission to space, Yuri Gagarin and the Soviet space program broke barriers within the astronomical community and forged a way for humanity's current and future endeavors into the cosmos.
On August 6, 1945, the United States dropped the first atomic bomb, Little Boy, on Hiroshima in Japan. 3 days later, on August 9th, a second bomb, Fat Man, was dropped on Nagasaki. Less than a week later, on August 15th, the Japanese Emperor Hirohito would announce his nation's unconditional surrender to American forces. With World War II finally at a close, two new superpowers would emerge on the global stage: the United States and the Soviet Union, both vying for power for their respective ideologies, capitalism and communism. The world would be brought into a 40-year conflict characterized by a series of proxy wars in former European colonies and the space race. Yuri Gagarin and the Soviet space program, humanity's first steps towards a future in the stars. The space race began in the late 1950s and was a race between the United States and the Soviet Union as to who could reach space first. In the United States, on July 29, 1958, President Eisenhower had formed the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA. Additionally, he created the Advanced Research Projects Agency, ARPA, which was designed to develop space technology for the military. In the Soviet Union, the space program of the USSR was started in the 1930s. This organization, however, was not heavily active until the end of the 1950s. The creation of these entities and the respective governments pouring money and resources into each program signaled the start of the space race. In the Soviet Union, on October 4th, 1957, Sputnik was launched. This was the world's first artificial satellite sent into Earth's orbit using IBM computers. This came as an unpleasant surprise to the United States, who would launch their own satellite, the Explorer 1, the following year. The two satellites were the first objects sent in space by a human. 4 years later, the Soviet Union would send the Vostok 1 into Earth's orbit. Aboard this rocket was a life-size dummy known as Ivan Ivanovich, along with a dog named Zvezdichka, who was named by Yuri Gagarin. This was done to see if any life, including animals, could survive in space. Later that year, the Vostok 1 would be launched into space again, this time carrying human life. On April 12, 1961, at 9:07 a.m. Moscow time, Yuri Gagarin was launched into the cosmos. Gagarin was born on March 9, 1934, in Klushino, a small village 100 miles from Moscow. He was born to Alexei Ivanovich Gagarin, a carpenter and bricklayer, and Anna Timofeyevna Gagarin, a milkmaid. Yuri was one of 4 children and lived in a relatively secluded childhood. However, as a teenager, he was a witness to an emergency landing made by a Soviet Yak fighter plane, which would later prove to be very influential in his life. Following his primary education, he went on to the Industrial College in Saratov and a trade school in Moscow. At this time, he also took courses in flying. Gagarin's interest in flying would eventually culminate in his joining the Soviet Air Force in 1955 and conducting his first solo mission.
After his success in the Soviet Air Force and receiving prestigious honors from his commander, he began training to become a cosmonaut. A few years later, the Soviet government began its process for finding a cosmonaut to travel to space. For the USSR, the most ideal individual to become cosmonauts were Russian Air Force pilots, and as a consequence, more than 200 would be selected as candidates. This was due to their exposure to various circumstances that would likely occur in a spaceflight, specifically the force of acceleration and the ejection process, along with the ability to deal with high-stress situations in the case that something went wrong. Gagarin, being a 27-year-old senior lieutenant at that time, fit this description and would be one of the candidates. His exceptional mathematics skills and honors he had received from his commander.
Given that humans had never been launched to space before, Russian scientists were not completely sure how space, specifically the weightlessness known to space, would affect Gagarin. Because of this, certain precautions were taken to ensure his safety. First of all, 10 days' worth of food and provisions were carried into space with him in the back compartment of the Vostok 1. Although the flight was intended to take under 2 hours, this was done in the chance that engine failure were to occur, and Gagarin would be forced to wait for orbit to naturally decay. Also, the capsule was equipped with very few onboard controls. Most work was to be done automatically. Over the span of 108 minutes, Gagarin would travel around the planet once. In this time, he would reach a maximum height of 203 miles, eventually falling back into the atmosphere. While this occurred, he would experience 8 times the pull of gravity.
Gagarin was immediately heralded as a hero across the Soviet Union. He was welcomed into Moscow with hundreds of thousands of people gathered in the Red Square. Upon return, he also became an important figure in Soviet politics. Along with becoming the commander of the Cosmonauts Detachment, he became a deputy of the Supreme Soviet of the Soviet Union, which was the most important legislative body in the nation. He was also awarded the Order of Lenin and named Hero of the Soviet Union, the highest prestige he could receive. Monuments were raised.
Unfortunately, On March 27, 1968, Gagarin was killed while test piloting the MiG-15, a jet fighter carrier. This was a global tragedy, and though he wouldn't live to see regular space travel truly come into fruition, it is clear that he played a major role. A year after Gagarin's death, on July 16, 1969, Apollo 11 was launched from NASA's Kennedy Space Center, and a few days later carrying Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins all the way to the moon. Since the dawn of man, people have looked up to the sky and felt a sense of wonder, considering what might exist in the infinite depths of space. After hundreds of thousands of years of human development, one man, named Yuri Gagarin, became the first of his kind to visit this vast expanse. Though his flight only lasted 108 minutes, its effects will be felt as long as man survives. Gagarin's journey brought hope to the world of a more technologically advanced future, in which humans had the ability to move easily throughout the cosmos, taking control of other planets and even star systems. As Chris Gaynor, president of the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada, said, Gagarin's journey to the cosmos revealed that the Soviet Union could do what the United States could not. They had satellites watching us 24/7 and nuclear missiles that could reach our homeland. Scientifically, it was a great achievement, but politically, it brought immense fear. As Michael Newsell, former chair of the Space History Division at National Air and Space Museum, said, the trip to space marked a new era, one where nuclear warfare was probable, and opened the world to the new battle between communism and capitalism. Advancements into space wouldn't stop with Gagarin in 1961. Even in the current day, human technology in space improves constantly. On November 20, 1998, the first segment of the ISS launched, creating a new landmark in the astronomical achievement. The first crew began to reside on the station on November 2, 2000, marking the first time that humans had ever lived outside of Earth for an extended period of time. Since the beginning of time, man has moved forward by breaking barriers. From the first time controlled fire was used, to the creation of the light bulb, to the birth of modern medicine. All the barriers broken up to this point have allowed humanity to strengthen its grasp on the world. This flight, this first voyage into the cosmos, broke an entirely different barrier. This didn't just help humanity better grasp Earth, but it also opened up an entire universe of possibilities. Humanity is still only in its infancy. On a day-to-day basis, it slowly pushes closer to grasping its true potential. But there is still a long road ahead. Technology at this point is limited, and extended space travel is still impractical. But all of that can change one day. There's truly no limit to what science can achieve, and this flight birthed even the slightest possibility that humans could ever move beyond the world they have always known. Since Gagarin's voyage, only a little more than 500 people have ever been to space. But this is set to change very soon. Various private and public entities have already expressed interest in making space more accessible for the general population. Certain organizations are even promising settlements on Mars within this half-century. There's no way of knowing whether any of these concepts will come into fruition in the years to come, but just the fact that they are being considered as a plausible possibility displays the importance of Yuri Gagarin's flight. In the end, as Stephen Hawking once put it, we are just an advanced breed of monkeys on a minor planet of a very average star, but we can understand the universe. That makes us something very special.